Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, you've shared just a remarkable set of sources with us. It's a first-hand history, so rich and detailed it almost reads like a novel.
It really does. We are diving into the life story of a man named Albert Schipper, who was born in the Netherlands back in 1929. And this is, it's more than just one person's history. It's a living document.
A living document of what, exactly?
It details the profound scarcity of post-war Europe, the huge gamble that immigration was, and this just relentless pursuit of self-worth.
So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We're going to use these sources to track his incredible journey. We'll follow him from, extreme poverty in the Dutch countryside during the Dirty Thirties.
Right, through the devastation of World War II.
All the way to his crucial immigration to Canada in 1949. And we'll watch how he carved out this successful, multi-generational life that, in the end, culminated on Prince Edward Island.
Yeah, and the time frame is really essential for context here. He was born in 29, he emigrated in April of 49, and then his integration was, you could say, formalized in May 1965 when he became a Canadian citizen in Charlottetown.
36 years?
Those 36 years are just a masterclass in resilience and adaptation.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right at the very beginning, at his birthplace. Albert's roots are in a place called Anew in the Drenthe region of the Netherlands. The sources describe his origins in these really stark, raw terms. He was born literally in the middle of the peat.
In the middle of the peat. And for anyone unfamiliar with that term, we're talking about boggy, swampy land, reclaimed land.
So really the bottom rung of the socioeconomic ladder.
Absolutely.
Okay.
What's so astonishing is how vividly the sources capture the material poverty. I mean, this wasn't just having a low income. This was living in literal mud. Albert grew up poor in these small huts in Drenthe made out of sod.
Structures built from peat and turf.
Exactly. It just sets the stage for the immense personal strength that was required simply to survive.
And then when Albert was only 5 years old, his father passed away.
And that's the moment where the lack of any social safety net becomes just painfully apparent.
Yeah.
The sources are very explicit about this. There was no welfare or any allowance for widows in their community at that time.
So if you didn't work, you didn't eat. Simple as that.
His mother was suddenly left to support her family through one of the worst economic depressions in modern history.
The sources spend a lot of time on the absolute grit of his mother, and rightly so. She worked on a farm for 13 years, basically managing the entire operation.
And this was continuous, just unforgiving manual labor. The details she provided, they paint a picture of utter physical exhaustion.
What kind of work are we talking about?
She was responsible for carrying all the water for the livestock. Pigs, cows, horses, which meant hauling these heavy buckets from the canals. She was splitting wood, cooking all the food.
And there's a detail about carrying milk, right?
Yes. In the summer, she'd carry milk over a kilometer just to get it back to the house. That kind of relentless maternal resilience, that's really the blueprint for Albert's own work ethic. It was an environment where you just had to work harder than everyone else.
And as if that struggle wasn't enough, the world then descends into war. The shadow of World War II fell right on top of this family's attempt to scratch out a living.
Oh, it fundamentally reshaped their entire trajectory. We know from the sources that Albert's older brothers were conscripted, but not for military service. They were forced to go to Germany to work.
Forced labor.
And in a terrifying twist, one of his brothers actively chose resistance. He joined the underground.
And the consequence of that.
He was incarcerated in a concentration camp. That level of collective trauma, the forced labor, the resistance, the concentration camp, it must have saturated the whole family atmosphere.
It makes the idea of staying in Europe, even after liberation, deeply unappealing.
Absolutely. And moving into that post-war period, peace didn't instantly bring prosperity. Albert was a young man looking for opportunity, but the opportunities were, they were scarce and grueling.
He worked on farms, doing what the sources call all hard labor with a shovel in the Weerdingermeer polders.
Right, and we should pause on that term, polders. For the listener, what exactly does working in the polders mean?
It's reclaimed land, right? Land taken back from the sea.
Exactly. So it means continuous, hard, wet labor. You're maintaining dikes, drainage systems. He was working in extremely demanding conditions, often wet and cold. And for all this, he was earning only about 20 guilders a week.
20 guilders a week? In the late 1940s, was that a decent wage or was it just a trap?
It was barely subsistence. While it's hard to do a precise conversion, that wage kept you tied to manual labor with virtually no chance of saving or any kind of upward mobility.
So it underscores the desperation that drove millions to look for better options overseas.
It does. And this economic reality made the first personal trigger for his emigration even more potent, and that was the military draft.
He was drafted in 1949, and where was he supposed to go?
To Dutch India, which is now modern Indonesia. The Dutch were fighting this protracted, brutal independence war there.
But he didn't go.
He fell ill right around the time of the draft. And his mother, remembering the trauma of the concentration camp, the forced labor, she intervened decisively. She convinced him not to go. His family had paid enough for Europe's wars.
So military service is off the table. He needs another option, fast. He tries the coal mines near his stepfather.
Yeah, he tried working 2,000 or 3,000 feet underground. But the sources say that lasted all of 3 days. He was a man of the open air, a farmhand. He realized immediately it was a losing cause.
And here's the turning point. That little bit of luck that so often underpins these stories. He'd made a friend during that brief time in the coal mine.
Someone who also hated working underground. And that friend decided to go to Canada in 1948. And critically, he secured Albert a job with a Dutch family that was already settled there.
So that friend was his pipeline to opportunity.
Absolutely. Albert quickly got his papers together, and on April 20th, 1949, he left. What I find remarkable is just how limited his perspective was at the time. He had a bit more than a grade 7 education. He didn't speak any English.
And the sources say he didn't even know his final destination.
He just knew it was Canada.
Yeah.
He was one of 52 people on what was described as the first immigrant plane. And that flight, it sounds like an endurance test itself. 3 days of travel.
3 days.
Oh, it was grueling. They flew from Amsterdam, stopped in Greenland, then Iceland. They got trapped in an 8-hour snowstorm.
Yeah.
They finally touched down in Newfoundland before going on to Montreal.
And there was a reception waiting for them.
Which highlights the magnitude of the moment. Canadian officials and the Dutch ambassador were there to personally welcome them. This wasn't just about individuals. This was part of a deliberate, large-scale, nation-building project.
So he lands in London, Ontario, ready to work, but he's facing this huge, immediate challenge of language. He didn't speak a single word of English.
Not a word. His first job, arranged by his friend, was milking cows for the Van Schaik family. That only lasted about 3 months. It was temporary.
Yeah, then he moves on.
He gets a position with a Canadian farmer named George Grieve, earning $60 a month. Now, that $60, it included room and board, but it was exceptionally low, even for farm labor back then.
And the sources confirm that with the insane hours he was working. We're talking about starting at 5 a.m. and often working until 10 or 11 at night during threshing and haying season.
It wasn't a job, it was servitude, a classic exchange of low wages for high effort, often exploiting the desperation of newcomers. But this only continued until Albert realized he had to assert his own value.
And this leads to that crucial confrontation, the story of the horse harness. This is where we see that grit passed down from his mother really manifests itself.
Right. His employer, George Grieve, had been talking around the community, saying that Albert didn't know how to harness the team of workhorses.
Which might have been true at first, but Albert was a quick study.
Exactly. The sources suggest by the time Grieve was gossiping, Albert had already mastered it. He understood the farmer was just trying to undercut his reputation to justify the low pay.
So Albert decides to make his move. One Saturday morning, he gets up before Grieve, goes out to the stable, and harnesses the horses flawlessly.
He finds the farmer, and using what the sources call half-broken English, he says, "Come on into the horse stable, and I want to show you something."
That takes incredible courage for a young guy who knows he's completely reliant on that job.
The farmer, cornered, tries to save face by critiquing some minor detail, saying a belt needed to be a hole tighter. Albert just calls the bluff.
He moves straight to the point. He demands a raise. He says, "I'm looking for more money." He told the farmer, "I want my $10, otherwise I leave."
This is just a tremendous risk assessment. If this fails, he's jobless, maybe homeless, and speaks no English. But he backed the farmer into a corner. Grieve tried to refuse, saying, "You're only a small fella."
But the threat was credible.
It was. The farmer eventually relented, agreed to $70 a month, but there was a condition. The raise was only temporary. Just until the threshing was done, then it would go back down to $60.
And this is the moment of real insight. Albert understood that a raise that could just be taken away wasn't a real recognition of his value.
Exactly. His response was pitch perfect. He said, "Well, that is not very good. A person, once he is up, he doesn't want to go down in his wages." That temporary raise told him everything.
It told him the farmer saw him as a seasonal tool, not a valued employee.
And he promptly quit. but the confidence boost from that was transformative. He placed a simple ad in the paper looking for a new job and got 13 letters in response.
13. So that bold move absolutely paid off.
It did. He got a job at a big dairy farm near Western University for a Mr. Kingsmill. His new wage, a stable $100 rental plus board.
That's a 66% raise.
Achieved purely through self-advocacy and a willingness to walk away from being exploited. He stayed there for a couple of years, finally finding some stability.
And we should recognize what that stability cost him. The sources say he was working 365 days a year initially. Sundays were just another work day.
The pay was better, but the intensity was still extreme. And that kind of isolated, non-stop work would breed immense loneliness and homesickness.
How did he cope with that?
The sources really highlight the critical role of the Christian Reformed Church in a town called Ilderton. It became his social and spiritual anchor. These church communities were often the primary network for Dutch immigrants.
They replaced the family and village structures left behind?
They did. They didn't just offer worship. They offered companionship, practical help, and a real sense of belonging.
And there's that wonderful anecdote that illustrates that sense of community.
Yes, the story of Reverend Gritter. Albert was living on this isolated farm, and during a really severe snowstorm, the Reverend drove his car as far as he could.
And then what?
Left it on the road and walked the long lane in the heavy snow just to pick Albert up for catechism class. That effort, that willingness to go the extra mile, it shows just how crucial these figures were.
Albert also made another strategic move to get more control over his time and his income.
He did. While still working full-time, he took a second job on weekends for about 6 weeks in 1951 on a tobacco farm in St. Thomas.
And that weekend hustle was smart.
It was very shrewd. He earned $9 a day plus board, which he called real good money. This wasn't just pocket cash, this was seed money. It let him build a financial buffer.
So he's transitioning from someone just surviving on a wage to someone who could start thinking like an entrepreneur.
And that vision started to solidify after his sister and her husband arrived from Holland and Albert moved to Norwich. He reflected that Canada was a country for all kinds of opportunities for anybody who wants to work, even if you don't have an education.
And he seized that opportunity.
By recognizing a niche market, he started his first proper business, a store on wheels, peddling Dutch groceries. He was bringing familiar comforts directly to all those isolated Dutch farming families in the region.
He wasn't just selling food, he was selling community and nostalgia. It's a brilliant business model.
And it connects right back to that church network. These early ventures, they thrive on trust and shared cultural background. This period also marks his big personal milestone. He married in September 1954, and the family started to grow.
But the business evolved pretty quickly. The store on wheels gave him capital and a network, which he then leveraged into his next phase, life insurance sales.
A logical transition. He moved into selling life insurance for Holland Life for about 5 years. It allowed him to keep serving his established Dutch network, only now he was selling security instead of groceries.
But not every venture turned to gold. Let's talk about the bread war. This gives us a fantastic insight into the harsh realities of North American retail.
Oh, it was a swift, brutal education in market dynamics. Albert decided to diversify by starting a bread business, specializing in European varieties, Polish, Belgian, Hungarian. He was trying to provide high-quality specialty goods.
But he was driven out almost instantly by the economics of the big supermarkets.
The problem was the loss leader. Big stores realized they could draw in traffic by making bread incredibly cheap. Albert was paying 16 cents a loaf wholesale.
And the supermarkets.
They started selling the exact same loaf for 10 cents. He simply could not compete. He was losing 6 cents on every loaf sold, while the big stores could absorb that loss because customers would then buy higher margin items.
The sources show he recognized the futility of that fight and he sold the business. This failure wasn't a defeat, was it? It was more like a tuition payment.
Precisely. It showed him that sheer hard work was no match for corporate scale and predatory pricing. He learned to pivot, a skill that's essential for any successful immigrant entrepreneur.
And that realization led to his next and most enduring adventure, the move to Prince Edward Island.
The PEI decision sounds remarkably spontaneous. The trip happened in 1963, right around the time of President Kennedy's assassination. They went there, made an offer on a farm, and decided to make the jump quickly, in late April of '64.
And imagine the logistics of this second immigration. They packed their entire lives into an old Volkswagen van.
With furniture and their 4 young children, Larry, age 9, a 5-year-old son, a 2-year-old daughter, and Richard, who was just a year old. Albert himself even noted the parallel, saying it was like immigrating from one province to another province.
He gets to PEI and immediately continues his dual career path, balancing practical sales, like bread, with financial planning, like life insurance.
He had successfully transplanted his entire life and business model to the island. By the time these sources were recorded, he'd been on PEI for nearly 37 years. He proudly notes the family's continuation, 12 grandchildren, and he summarizes his adopted country with this potent phrase, "Canada is God's country and a country for opportunities."
So, what does this all mean for us today? The sources lay bare this profound connection between the scarcity Albert faced, the sod huts, the military draft, the poverty, and his absolute relentless pursuit of opportunity in Canada.
And it highlights that success wasn't just about hard work. It was about network building and community.
Oh.
The Christian Reformed Church didn't just soothe homesickness, it was the mechanism that allowed him to enter the market with his Dutch grocery store.
So foundational values and those critical social connections were just as vital as splitting wood or milking cows.
They were.
When you look at the entire arc of his life, what stands out to you about the grit it took to demand that $10 raise when he could barely speak the language? That moment, for me, it defines his entire journey.
I think if we connect this to the bigger picture, Albert Schipper's story about the temporary nature of that raise, it teaches us something really important about the precariousness of labor for newcomers back then.
The farmer tried to walk it back as soon as the hard work was done.
Exactly. And Albert refused to accept that his value was seasonal. That moment, quitting the job because his employer wouldn't honor the agreement, was a statement of self-worth that set the ethical and economic standard for the rest of his family's success. It took immense personal courage to stand up for himself, despite the risk of losing everything. And I think that courage is what we should all take away.
A truly powerful and illuminating reflection. Thank you for sharing these incredible sources for this deep dive into Albert Schipper's journey.